Mary, Queen of Scots, is one of the most famous women in European history. Her life is usually told as a tragic romance, a beautiful queen destroyed by betrayal, love, and political cruelty. But when you look closer, something far more unsettling appears. Mary was not born to rule. She was never meant to be queen at all. Her entire reign began as an accident of death, timing, and dynastic collapse. Few places are more closely tied to Mary than Stirling Castle. As a child, she was brought here for protection from her great-uncle Henry VIII, whose armies threatened Scotland during what became known as the Rough Wooing. As a mother, she returned here to celebrate the baptism of her son James, and it was after leaving Stirling that she was abducted by Bothwell, an event that would destroy her reign forever. Even more chilling, in the church just outside the castle walls, her 1-year-old son was crowned King of Scots, while Mary was still alive, still queen, and already being pushed aside. To understand why Mary's fate unfolded the way it did, we have to begin with her mother, Marie de Guise. Marie was not a minor noblewoman. She belonged to one of the most powerful families in France, deeply tied to the Franco-Scottish alliance that protected Scotland from England. When James V of Scotland married her, he secured French money, French soldiers, and French prestige. It was such an important political match that he built the magnificent Renaissance palace at Stirling for her. But Marie was never supposed to be his wife. She had originally been pursued by Henry VIII himself, and famously joked that her neck was too small for such a dangerous marriage. James had first gone to France to marry a French princess as part of Scotland's alliance with France. That princess was Madeleine of Valois, already gravely ill. The French king tried to replace her with another bride, but Madeleine insisted on marrying James anyway. They were wed in Notre Dame Cathedral on January the 1st, 1537. 2 months later, she was dead. James returned to Scotland widowed and only then married Marie de Guise, the woman who would become Mary's mother. At first, everything seemed secure. James V and Marie de Guise had 2 sons before Mary. These were the boys who were meant to rule Scotland. The first, Prince James, was born in May 1540. He was healthy, celebrated, baptized with great ceremony, and proclaimed heir to the throne. Messages were sent across Europe. Scotland had its future king. Less than a year later, a second son was born, Prince Robert. And then, in April 1541, something extraordinary and devastating happened. Both boys died almost at the same time. Robert was only days old. James, the heir, was not yet 1 year old. Their deaths came within hours of each other. 2 princes gone in a single night. We do not know exactly what killed them. Most likely it was some form of infection or fever, the kind of childhood illness that was still deadly even in royal palaces. But for the Scottish crown, this was not just a family tragedy. It was a dynastic collapse. In one stroke, Scotland lost its future. Marie de Guise lost both of her sons. James V lost both of his heirs, and with them went the stability of the monarchy. Only after this double death, 8 months later, was Mary born. She was never meant to be queen. She was the 3rd attempt at a future that had already been taken away twice, and fate was not finished. 6 days after her birth, her father died as well. So Scotland was left with a newborn girl as its only monarch. Mary's crown was not won. It was what remained after death. Mary inherited a crown not because she was chosen, but because everyone else vanished. Her survival made her queen. Her existence became a political problem. England wanted her. France wanted her. Scotland feared losing her. She was sent away as a child to the French court, where she was raised not as a Scottish ruler, but as a future French queen. She spoke French fluently, followed Catholic rituals, dressed like French nobility, and absorbed the politics of the Valois court. And this is only the beginning. If you enjoy thoughtful history, stay with this channel and subscribe. Mary's first husband was not just a king. He was the last fragile thread holding together the life she was supposed to have. Francis II of France had been part of Mary's destiny since childhood. She was sent to France at the age of 5, not for safety, but for transformation, to be turned into a French queen. While Scotland fought wars and rebellions, Mary grew up inside the most elegant court in Europe, speaking French better than Scots, trained to rule beside a Valois king. Francis was gentle, shy, and physically weak. He was nothing like the warriors who ruled Scotland. But Mary loved him. He was her companion, her protector, and her escape from the chaos of her birthright. When Francis became King of France in 1559, Mary became Queen of France overnight. For a brief moment, she was the most powerful woman in Europe, Queen of France, Queen of Scotland, and a legitimate Catholic claimant to the English throne. But the crown was already killing him. Francis had been sick since childhood. He suffered from chronic infections, fragile bones, and constant weakness. Within months of his coronation, his health collapsed. He developed a severe ear infection, something normally survivable, but in his case it turned fatal. The infection spread into his brain. He suffered seizures, delirium, and unbearable pain. Doctors could do nothing. At just 16 years old, Francis II died in December 1560. Mary was 18, a widow in a foreign country, with no political protection left. The French court turned cold. Her power vanished overnight. The Guise family, her mother's relatives, were pushed aside. Mary was no longer Queen of France. She was just a foreign queen without a throne. So she was sent back to Scotland, not because she wanted to go, but because she had nowhere else to belong. Her marriage to Francis had been the only time in her life when she was not a pawn, and it ended in silence, infection, and a young king dying in her arms. From that moment on, Mary's life would never be gentle again. Mary's second husband was not chosen by fate. He was chosen by desperation. Lord Henry Stuart, known to history as Darnley, was handsome, charming, tall, and royal. Everything a queen was expected to marry. He was also arrogant, violent, and dangerously ambitious. He shared Tudor blood with Mary through Margaret Tudor, which meant their children would have the strongest possible claim to the English throne. On paper, the match was perfect. In reality, it was a disaster. Mary married Darnley in 1565 against the advice of almost everyone around her. At first, he dazzled her. He was young, flirtatious, and made her feel wanted after the emotional devastation of losing Francis. But once the wedding was done, Darnley changed. He demanded power. He wanted to be king in more than name. He wanted control of government, titles, and authority. When Mary refused, he became bitter, jealous, and cruel. His insecurity turned into rage when Mary grew close to her secretary, David Rizzio, a loyal Italian advisor who helped her rule. Darnley convinced himself Rizzio was not just a political rival, but a lover. So he decided to destroy him. In March 1566, while Mary was 6 months pregnant, Darnley and his conspirators burst into her private chambers. Rizzio was dragged screaming from behind her skirts and stabbed more than 50 times in front of the queen. Mary was held at gunpoint. She watched blood soak into the floor while her husband stood by and did nothing. That night killed their marriage forever. Mary escaped, outwitted Darnley, and within months gave birth to a son, James, the future King of Scotland and England. But Darnley was now isolated, hated by the court, and feared by the Queen. And then he died. In February 1567, Darnley was found dead in a house that had been blown apart by an explosion. His body was discovered outside, untouched by the blast, strangled. Someone had murdered him. And the shadow of suspicion fell straight onto Mary. Whether she was guilty or merely surrounded by men who were willing to kill for her, history would never let her escape that night. Darnley was not the love of her life. He was the fuse that ignited the catastrophe that destroyed her reign. After Darnley came the man who would end everything. James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, was not charming in the way Darnley was. He was dangerous. A hardened nobleman, a soldier, a political survivor. He understood violence, loyalty, and power, and he understood Mary. He had served her faithfully for years, defending her against rebels and enemies when others wavered. When Darnley was murdered, Bothwell was one of the few men still willing to stand beside the Queen, and that made him indispensable. But he was also deeply suspected of being involved in Darnley's death. Even when a trial declared him innocent, few believed it. The court whispered. The people watched. Mary was vulnerable. She was exhausted, grieving, and politically isolated. That is when Bothwell made his move. In April 1567, after escorting her from Edinburgh, Bothwell intercepted Mary on the road and took her to Dunbar Castle. What happened there remains one of the most controversial moments in Scottish history. Some accounts say he raped her. Others suggest pressure, manipulation, or something darker and more complicated. What is certain is that Mary emerged changed, and soon after, she married him. The union shocked Scotland. A queen marrying the man most suspected of killing her husband was political suicide. The nobles turned against her. The people revolted. The myth of Mary the rightful ruler collapsed almost overnight. Within weeks, Mary was captured by rebel lords and imprisoned. Bothwell fled. Their marriage, like her throne, was already dead. Bothwell would never see her again. He escaped to Scandinavia, was arrested, and spent the rest of his life locked away, slowly losing his mind in a foreign prison. He died alone, insane, and forgotten. Mary, meanwhile, was forced to abdicate her throne in favor of her infant son. She would never rule Scotland again. Bothwell was not her savior. He was the final catastrophe, the man who loved her, used her, or destroyed her, and possibly all three. And after him, Mary would never be safe again. Mary did not fall in battle. She did not die as a reigning queen. She disappeared behind locked doors. After being forced to abdicate the Scottish throne, Mary fled south into England in 1568, believing her cousin Elizabeth Arch would protect her. Instead, she walked into a gilded prison. For almost 19 years, Mary was held captive. She was moved from castle to castle, Tutbury, Sheffield, Chartley, Fotheringhay, always under guard, always watched, always controlled. Her rooms were damp, cold, and often filthy. The windows were barred. The doors were locked. She could not leave without permission. Even her letters were read and censored. She was a queen in name only. Most of her servants were spies. Even her bedchamber was not truly private. She was denied regular access to priests, though she was a devoted Catholic. She suffered from chronic illness, rheumatism, stomach pain, joint inflammation, and was often unable to walk without help. Yet she was never allowed peace, because Mary was still dangerous. To Catholics across Europe, she was not just the former Queen of Scots. She was the rightful Queen of England. Elizabeth I was, in their eyes, illegitimate. As long as Mary lived, She was a living alternative to Elizabeth's throne, and so plots formed around her. Some were real, some were exaggerated, some were created by Elizabeth's own spies. The most famous was the Babington Plot of 1586, a scheme to assassinate Elizabeth and place Mary on the English throne. Mary, trapped and desperate, wrote letters that seemed to support the plan. Those letters were intercepted, decoded, and used against her. Whether she fully understood that she was being trapped is still debated. But the result was clear. She was put on trial for treason. A foreign queen, tried by a court that had no legal right over her. She defended herself calmly, insisting that she had never consented to Elizabeth's murder. But the verdict was already decided. Elizabeth hesitated. Mary was her cousin, and executing an anointed queen was an act that terrified every monarch in Europe. But in February 1587, Elizabeth finally signed the death warrant. Mary was told she would die. On the morning of February 8th, she dressed with care. She wore black velvet, and beneath it a deep crimson gown, the color of Catholic martyrdom. She had prepared for this moment. When she entered the great hall at Fotheringhay Castle, she did not tremble. She walked to the scaffold. She forgave the executioner. She prayed aloud in Latin. When the axe fell, it did not kill her instantly. It took multiple blows. The crowd watched in silence. Her body was treated with little dignity. Even in death, she was feared. Mary, Queen of Scots, had lost her crown, her freedom, her child, and finally her life. Not because she was weak, but because she was too powerful to be allowed to live. Her tragedy was not that she failed. It was that she was born into a world that could not tolerate what she was. And yet, history played its final irony. Mary lost her crown. She lost her freedom. She lost her life. But her bloodline won. Her son James VI of Scotland inherited the English throne in 1603, uniting the crowns and founding the dynasty that still rules Britain today. Mary was never meant to rule. She was made queen by death, raised for the wrong country, and destroyed by a world that had no place for her. But in the end, it was her blood that endured when all others failed. She was not a failure of character. She was a victim of fate. Thank you for watching. If you value history told carefully and accurately, consider staying with this channel and subscribing. The past deserves precision as much as curiosity.